Good evening, students. Hope you guys are having a great Tuesday evening. My name is Stephanie, if you don't know me. I just want to give you a few housekeeping tips before we get started. Don't forget to make sure you have your question and answer box up and ready to go. I've got a couple of announcements I want to share with you. We have a brand new page on our website dedicated to you guys, our current students, and I wanted to show it to you. So I'm going to do a quick screen share here and show you guys the new webpage. So if you go to our homepage, you can click, if you're at the homepage, you're there, and there's a tab right here, and there's a tab right here dedicated to our current students. I want you guys to notice that this login is not to Moodle. It is not to anything. This is an administrative tab that we have to have. So if you're having problems logging into things, and you're using this button, it's probably because that's not where you're supposed to be. So if you'll come down to the current students page, and you can see there's a button that goes straight to the online classroom, a button where you can make a payment. This will take you to our Hangouts page on Google+. And lastly, there is a tab for Church Community Builder. This is our database that we're using at the office, and we want you guys to be connected to it. There's lots of things that we can do with this program, but we need you guys' help to get logged in and to look at your profile and to make sure that all of your information is correct, that you can receive text messages from us and things like that. So please, 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 if you do not know how to get on Church Community Builder, please contact me, send me an email at stephanie@destinyvisioncenter.com or stephanie@destinyleadershipinstitute.com. And let me switch this back here. Also, I want to talk to you guys about our conference that is coming up. In June 7th through 9th. We will be, it's going to be a great time. If you don't know anything about our annual conference, we do this once a year. We've been doing it for several years, and it's just a great time for leaders to come together and get connected and get involved. And we're going to have graduation on the 8th. And so make sure you find out information about that. Registration is going to open on March the 1st. So be watching for an email from me or from Landon or from someone in our office about how to get involved in the Destiny Gathering Conference. You will not want to miss this great opportunity to connect with other leaders and students and all of this. So also, before I turn it over to Landon and let him introduce our guest, I want to let you know that our next webinar hangout will be March 8th at 6:30, and we'll have special guest Ryan Lowe. So with that, Landon, you guys go ahead and take it away.
Good evening, everyone. Glad that you joined us tonight. It's going to be a great night. Got my friend Pastor Jason Warman in the house. Pastor Jason will tell you a little bit more about himself in a moment, but we're actually coming off of our annual board meeting. Pastor Jason sits on the board. So we've had a great week of strategizing and just planning and talking about DLI. Our board members, our board's comprised of pastors from all over the place, that many of them do such great work, and they're so proud of DLI and proud of you guys and the work that you're doing. So want to pass on some congratulations and some love that they asked me to send to you. So I'm not going to take up much of Pastor Jason's time. Pastor Jason, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe a little about CoastLife.
Sure.
And let them know who you are.
Well, my name's Jason. I pastor CoastLife Church in Venice, Florida, which is in the southwest part of the state, way down there, much warmer there probably than where you're at. But I've been there we'll have our 6th anniversary this year. We relaunched the church a little over 5 years ago, and God has really blessed us with some amazing growth and some good things happening. And so, man, it's just great to be on with you guys tonight. I did want to say to our DLI students that, we're all shaped by our teachers, the people that pour into us. And I think you've probably made one of the wisest choices you could make, to have your life and ministry shaped by the leadership at DLI. I can tell you that my life has been shaped by Dr. Brassfield and the Ministry of Destiny and Destiny Leadership Institute before it was really formally DLI. And it's just a great thing to be a part of. And so I'm proud that you're a part of it. And I just wanted to give a great big shout out to Dr. Brassfield for being a friend and mentor for so many years. But you guys are in a good place. I mean, it's you can get training and equipping, but it's where you get planted is where so much of your life and your values comes from. And I can't think of anything greater to be planted into than right here at DLI.
Right.
And Landon's okay too, just in case you're wondering. He's all right.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Thank you. We actually lived about 25 miles apart and didn't really know each other.
Right, yeah.
You were in New Albany, Mississippi.
New Albany, come on.
It's not a long way from Venice, Florida.
Yeah. A little bit different.
Right. So tonight you're going to talk to us about some practical aspects of leadership, about the heart of a servant. And just so the students have a little context, with you relaunching a church, I know you don't like to brag on yourself. I don't like to brag on you either, but someone's got to do it, I guess. You took over a church that around 15 people.
Right.
I believe your bio says about the average age of Methuselah.
Yeah.
And so it was an older church, a church that was dying and needed to be.
It was dead. It'd been dead for a long time.
And so it needed to be relaunched. Now you are in 4 weekend services.
Right.
Building you're almost finished with a brand new building.
Yeah, we'll move in a couple weeks.
Just beautiful, incredible project. And you've done so really by developing a great team of young leaders. Like that's probably the thing I think of with CoastLife is just the teaming with young leaders, and many of them were raw and undeveloped.
Right.
But you launched the church by developing them.
Yeah, we started out. We did. We took a church that had 15 people in it. The church was around for 25 years and had never really had more of 40 or 50 people in attendance. So its heyday wasn't necessarily anything that you would measure success by, I guess. And then, of course, the congregation had gotten older and dwindled. And then we shut it down and relaunched it. And when we relaunched, we were what I would call a glorified youth group. It was just teenagers, young adults. I was 33 when I did that, and I was by far the oldest person sort of that was connected to the church. And so God gave us some grace to learn things and to apply some things. And what I want to share tonight is really just 5 years of observation, of just watching things that have worked and watching things that haven't worked and picking up on the characteristics of things. I'm big on values. When we were relaunching, one of the things that Dr. Brassfield taught me and that we walked through was, you got to lead with your values before your vision. Not the wrong vision, but values is what's going to determine who you are. And so I've really believed in that and applied that at CoastLife Church. And so, when you talk about leadership and the heart of leadership, I want to start with just something really super practical, and then kind of go into just more of a heart aspect of leadership and sort of a value. I think that helps guide leaders. But, when we talk about teams, we do have a very effective team ministry at CoastLife because we run 4 services a weekend. We're not a large church. We just have a really small building. And so we've filled it up with growth, and we've just added services. There's not too many people that have it's a great problem to have, but it is problematic in the fact that we have to run so many services and we don't have a lot of paid staff and a large congregation. It's a church that just by necessity has had to add services, and we do it with volunteers and that's that type of thing. And I think one of the things that I think is so important is just looking at ministry teams that have done well and ministries and teams that haven't done well. And over the past 5 years, I've seen teams flourish and I've seen teams fizzle. And when you look at that, the ones that succeed always have a leader that is driven by the right values. And the teams that fizzle are led by leaders who either they don't have the right values, or their heart just isn't in it. And it very much is about the leader. When people ask about volunteers, I've never seen a team that had a high quality leader that struggled to get volunteers. But I've seen teams that didn't have a great leader, and we couldn't throw enough. If we turned the whole attention of the church to that person's team, they still wouldn't have enough, because it's just on the leader. It's almost like John Maxwell knew what he was talking about. I mean,
Almost.
It's almost that everything rises and falls on leadership. And this is something we are talking about, and it's the power of a cup of coffee. Whenever you talk about team leadership and being a leader in a church, there's one group of leaders that will try to lead by text message and there's nothing wrong with that,
right.
or we'll try to lead by, we use a program called Church Community Builder, where we schedule our volunteers. A lot of churches may use that as well. And what happens when you're talking about leadership and leading people and leading a ministry team is the leaders that don't succeed, either there's 3 classifications. I think there's maybe still churches out here that roll this way, but one group, they just see who shows up and they use those people, right. Which for that, I would recommend that maybe we institute some sort of capital punishment system within the church to deal with that type of situation. The second group is people that just try to lead by shooting out a need. Hey, I need you this weekend, or putting somebody on a schedule. Hey, I want to throw you on the schedule for this weekend. The first 2 never build high quality ministries, never build high quality teams. The third one is a leader who is personally engaged with his team. And that's where we coin the phrase, the power of a cup of coffee. Because I got to noticing that the leaders that do well are the leaders that actually physically engage with their team. They actually build community in their team. They actually provide pastoral leadership for their team. In other words, their heart's in it. They're not just filling a position or trying to get some tasks done. They actually have a leadership mentality and a ministry. And so we started just teaching that, to go sit down with somebody, spend some time with the people on your team, check in on them, not just when you need them to cover the weekend, right, but shoot them a text message that you know what they're going through, what you're praying for them, and that type of thing. Those types of leaders never have a lack of people. Like they attract people because people want to belong, they want to serve. Everybody has 2 needs: to be needed and to be known. And so a lot of times leaders only focus on one, which is we need you, but they're not known. They're not appreciated or valued. And the leaders that really I've seen that have had great success understand the power of a cup of coffee. And that is that maybe 15 minutes at a coffee shop with your team members, some type of engagement outside of just the ministry, builds that influence in and keeps a team healthy and connected. And it literally becomes just the power of sitting down with somebody and having a cup of coffee, pouring into their life a little bit. And that very much comes from the heart of what a leader is looking to do. And there's a passage in the Bible, the difference between a hired hand and a shepherd. And it's found in John chapter 10, verses 12 through 13. Jesus said, "A hired hand will run when he sees a wolf coming. He will abandon the sheep because they don't belong to him, and he isn't their shepherd. And so the wolf attacks them and scatters the flock. The hired hand runs away because he's working only for the money and doesn't really care about the sheep." And so I kind of just observation have listed some things that I think are the difference between a hired hand and a shepherd. And Jesus is talking about himself. He's the good shepherd. But as church leaders, we're the under shepherds, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, we can apply this to our leadership. And so I made a list and sat down and just started talking about the differences between people who are effective leaders in church, who kind of go the extra mile, and those who just sort of want to fill a position, get some tasks done, but people don't tend to follow them because they've got the what, but they don't have the why, or there's something off with the heart of the leader. And the next part is sort of the heart of leadership. And I think one of the difference between a hired hand which a hired hand is a poor quality leader. It's somebody who's around the flock, but a shepherd is somebody who is a true, genuine leader who cares for the flock.
And I think many of our students are probably in the second chair positions, leading. And I think how this applies is that a lot of them probably aren't getting paid. So they're not quote unquote, they're not actually hired, but their motive rather than a shepherd's heart. We often think of a pastor as a shepherd. However, anyone that leads people in a church is a shepherd.
Right.
And so, what your motivation to get a task done, or is your motivation to have a title, or is your motivation to really shepherd and pastor and love people?
Right. If you are responsible for any group of people within a church, that puts you in the category of a shepherd,
right?
Because you are part of the leadership of the flock. And so, it's not just pastoral leadership that this would apply to. It would be anybody, whether it's a small group or a ministry team or a youth ministry or whatever it is. Anytime that you are engaging a group of people within the church, you become, in essence, their pastor or their shepherd, and you become that leader for their life. And man, the health of a church is determined by the health of the leadership, not just the senior leadership or maybe the pastor, but it's determined by the health of the leaders that are within the body of Christ. Because a pastor can grow 100 people, but once you go past that, the ratio that we use is we need one super high quality leader per 100 people. Right. And I've seen that lived out. So if you want to build a church of 1,000, you better have 10 high quality leaders. Pay doesn't matter. Honestly, I've seen people who were paid staff that underperformed volunteers before. I mean, we've literally seen it. I've seen people who are completely volunteer who were more vital to an organization than paid staff. I mean, I think you have to take that word. You sort of have to remove that element from it, because it's not necessarily. In fact, Jesus said it in that passage, is that the hired hand warns away because he's only working for money, but a shepherd, that's not the motivation for the shepherd. And I think one of the difference between a hired hand and the shepherd is a hired hand seeks a position. A shepherd seeks purpose. And I would describe that this way: is positional leadership doesn't do well when the wolf attacks. Whenever people are just filling a position or they're positionally minded, nothing happens with ease. There's never a lack of difficulties or strife or anything like that. And if there's not a purpose behind a person and their leadership, then they won't do well when there is adversity. And I think you really tell the difference. Positional leaders want the church to sort of flood volunteers and flood them with resources, which if there's a church in America that has all the volunteers and all the resources and all the money it needs, then I would like to put my resume in for that position, because that would be amazing. And so what happens is positional leaders are always frustrated by what they don't have. That's a hired hand mentality. Purpose-driven leaders, I've never seen a leader that was driven by purpose that ever ran away when there was a lack of people, a lack of finances, or a lack of attention. That those people have the drive to stand when the wolf attacks, for lack of better. When there is adversity, and I don't know where there's not adversity. I mean, you see it when the hired hand is just wanting resources, and you want your church to equip you, and I understand all of that kind of stuff. But the reality of it is most of the time we just don't have all the resources we need, and we can't take the whole attention of the church and turn it towards ushers or greeters or whatever. And man, the difference between a hired hand and a shepherd really is, are you filling a position, or is there a purpose driving what you're doing? And the second thing I think is, a hired hand remains an outsider. The shepherd becomes part of the sheep. I began to pick up on something really quickly, and that is in the advice that people would give me. And if they ever said, you know what you guys should do, I knew where they were. It's like, you just can't, you can't be a quality leader and maintain an outsider's position. And a shepherd doesn't look at an us versus them mentality. With a shepherd, it's an us mentality. And, if you're going to be a leader in a church, you can't be outside of the church or think of yourself outside of the church. It has to be an us and a we, and not a them and a they.
Right.
And there's, for whatever reason, there are sometimes reasons why people don't fully engage. Maybe they've got bigger dreams, or they're wanting to go to a different position or whatever, but it will cap you in a major way, because what happens is you just become a kind of a helper, and churches don't operate well with helpers.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have owners at some point, people that own it. And hired hands look at themselves as helpers to the church. Shepherds look at themselves as owners of the church, like it's theirs.
And I think hired hands, typically from my experience, they're the ones that see all the problems in the church that need to be solved, but rarely take the initiative to be the agents to help change and solve them. Right.
It's you guys should do this. Well, that's great. I thought you were on the team. Maybe you could help with that at some point. But it's just one of those difference in mentalities that if you don't fully engage, even the team that you're on, you cannot lead from outside. Mm-hmm. You cannot lead from outside. You can only influence by being fully engaged. Whatever ministry it is, you have to your heart has to go all in with that, and that has to become.
And that's what a shepherd would do with his sheep. Literally live with the sheep. Whenever Jesus earlier said that he was earlier in this passage that he was the door of the sheep pen. So a shepherd in the first century, you would have a sheep pen, only one door in, one door out, and at night the shepherd would literally sleep in the opening to keep the sheep from coming out and keep a wolf from coming in, so that if an enemy wanted to attack, they'd have to go over the shepherd, and if the sheep wanted to escape, they'd have to go over the shepherd.
Right.
And you can't lead people if you're not there with them to protect them. And I think guard them, to keep them safe.
I think that's why those teams never do well, is people know whether or not you're laying at the door.
Right.
That becomes pretty evident. If you're not engaged, there's not going to be a team engaged around you. I mean, it's so simple, but yet it's just a hard thing. I mean, it's kind of hard. Like, I was thinking about next steps for some of this stuff. I really don't know what it is, except your heart has to get into it. You have to get fully engaged with it. And I've never seen a leader that was fully engaged that had a problem influencing and leading people. It just really is the difference in that. The third thing is, and this is one, man, I've lived this and seen this, but I'm talking about the difference between a hired hand, somebody who just sees themselves as a helper, somebody who's not fully engaged, and a leader who is fully engaged. And the third thing that I think is the difference between a hired hand and a shepherd is a hired hand gets annoyed at being instructed, and a shepherd desires coaching and growth.
Yeah.
There is just, when somebody is a hired hand and they got the temporary mentality, they got the outsider mentality, they are completely uncoachable. And I think you can really tell a difference between a quality leader and a poor leader by their teachability. Are they hungry to grow? Are they hungry? And that's I love talking to Leadership Institute students, because these are people that are hungry to grow. I mean, they're trying to grow in their leadership, and so kudos to them. But when DLI is done and you're serving in your ministry, as well as I do, you're just getting started on a lifelong pursuit of trying to grow in your knowledge. And a hired hand always resists instructions, but shepherds love what they do, and they want to get better and better.
Right.
And so we bring people in from the outside into CoastLife because I want to get better. I don't want to stay the same. I have a few people on my team, even, you could play the pastor card, but I have a few people on my team that I want them to critique the message because I want to know, am I connecting? Am I not connecting? And one reason is because I'm a phenomenal person. But the second reason for that, is I want to reach people.
Right.
And I can't do that if I've gotten lazy, or I've gotten stuck in a rut, or I'm using outdated illustrations in my movies from Rocky, and no one in this generation has seen Rocky or whatever it is, And so I want that feedback. I think that's in the heart of every good leader, is coach me, get me to the conference, get me the book, get me what I need, because I want to do better. Because ultimately, if I raise the lid of my leadership, I raise the ability of my life to minister to the flock and see the flock grow healthy and strong. On the other hand, hired hands, and you can't even critique them, very emotional. And it gets brutal sometimes. The idea of constructive criticism and looking inwardly and being at it, and nobody wants to be singled out and new, but it would have been a great weekend if it wasn't for you. But it's the reality of it. And I tell our team, I'm like, if heaven and hell are real, and I believe they are, then what we do is important.
Yeah.
And so we can't afford to not be vulnerable and not be overly emotional, and open up our hearts and be teachable. That, to me, that is one of the biggest things. Is, are you teachable? Can somebody critique you? I mean, I'm not saying every negative voice in the world has to influence you or whatever, but man, a shepherd just desires to be coached. I crave it in my own life. I want to be coached. I know there's so much room for growth. And at the end of the day, that is directly tied to how well the ministry is going to do.
In 2015, DLI had our best year ever. Just grew in so many different ways. And so I started off this spring semester by just patting myself on the back. No, really. What I did is I actually chose 20 students, many of you guys that are watching, and you to critique us. Like, why? Like, what are we doing that doesn't make sense to you?
Right.
Or where are the holes? What assignments are you doing that just kind of seem pointless? And if I didn't ask you, please don't tell me like right now. Like, wait and tell me later. But what is it? Where can we get better? And as a leader, it would have been much easier to say, we had our best year. Let's just keep doing what we're doing. Yeah, but because our best year right now is 100 students, but I don't want 100. I want 150. I want 200. And to do that, we have to keep being better. We had breakfast this morning. Jason, you're a pastor, from your perspective, like what this area, how can we do this better? How can we communicate this better? And that's a shepherd's heart. So if, as a leader, if I was getting paid hourly, just to swipe a time clock and just run this from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, my mentality would be a little bit different, because this is my passion. So we all should be serving somewhere that we're that passionate about.
Periodically, I'll secret shop our church.
Oh goodness!
I'll have somebody come
Scary.
in, and it is, you know it's going to be brutal, but that's what you want.
Right.
And my theory on that is people on the inside find excuses, people on the outside find reasons, and I want to know the reasons. I can see the excuses, but I can tell the difference. Man, the hired hands, it burns them up. The high quality shepherds in my church, they want to know what that feedback is. Doesn't matter how negative it is, they want to get it fixed. They want to get it right. And so we built into our weekly meetings what went right. Let's celebrate what went right first before we start brutally attacking one another. And then second question is what went wrong. Okay, so let's celebrate the wins. People came to Christ. Okay, let's celebrate that. Okay, now let's talk about how we do it better. Here's the difference between a hired hand and a shepherd. A hired hand dreads more sheep because it's more work and sacrifice. A shepherd will lay down his life for the sheep. There's just a minimal effort mentality to hired hands. You can see it when we add services. We've added 2 services and then 3 services and now 4 services. And obviously, I mean, even myself, you go, wow, 4 services a weekend, that's going to be a lot.
Good thing you're just a phenomenal natural preacher.
Right. Yeah. It's so easy for me. But, when you add that service, a shepherd will get excited because they know more sheep. The hired hand, they'll dread that. I mean, like any kind of growth strains them because they're not in it for the right reasons. They're just they're there to get their work in and get out of there. This is similar to one that we've already said, but I want a perspective. A hired hand doesn't become part of the flock, but a shepherd smells like sheep. And to me, the smell test of a leader is culture.
Right.
Like whenever there's a shepherd, they pass the smell test. They're part of the house. They embrace the vision of the church. They embrace the values of the church. But a hired hand, that you just see the way they operate and kind of the things they do, and it's outside of the stream of the culture of the church. And man, it's like I really believe that if you're going to be a part of a church, you should be a son or a daughter of the house. Like there should be the DNA of that church in your life and how you live. And I've seen that happen. I've seen leaders that would rise up and they just didn't want to embrace either the excellence, or they didn't want to embrace the life-giving part of it, or they didn't want to embrace something about it. And you look at that person, and from me, I'm just thinking, man, that's not a son or daughter of the house. Like that baby don't look like me. More Povich is gonna have to me like, and I'm just gonna be like, no, dog, no, I always love the hand gesture. No, dog, that baby don't look like me. And you have to be a son or daughter of the house. The values of that church have to become something more than on paper. You have to smell like the church you're a part of, which it has to be built into the DNA. Whatever the passion of that church is, that should be all our passion. Right. You can't operate with hired hands. You want to fill a position role, but they don't want to embrace the values and the methodology of that church. It creates a misalignment, and it's just not healthy. And I've seen some rock stars come through our church that the talent is there. I mean, there's no doubt about the talent, but they just never became a son or daughter of the house. And because of that, people didn't follow them. They ended up following into the culture, the leader who has the culture of our house. And it just kind of puts a lid on a person, and they don't work out. And then here's the other thing. A hired hand wants to do the minimum to keep his or her position. A shepherd does whatever it takes to have the flock. And I like it to say it this way. A hired hand tracks hours. A shepherd tracks results. Yes. And I want to preface that by saying, I'm not talking about working harder and working more. That's actually the opposite. I'm not talking about burning people out. But there is a time mentality where either people go to extremes. One is, I'll give you 30 minutes a week that I'll donate to the church. That's just not a mentality to me. I mean, we're not a I know we have a nonprofit status, but we're not a church and a nonprofit are two different things. Right. I've never seen a healthy leader in a church track hours. And then on the other hand, people who get extremely proud of how many hours in church 3 nights this week or 4 nights this week. I've never seen that be a healthy reality in the life of a leader. Leaders don't track hours. Shepherds don't track hours. They track results. Right. Which means, there's some seasons where I may be at the church every night. There may be some seasons where I'm not there very much at all, but it's not dependent on, I'm not punching a time clock. I'm looking at results and the health of the ministry and what needs to be done. And I walked through this with a friend of mine a while back who was contemplating letting a staff member go, and that's a big deal at a church. And we were walking through what's going on. And this particular team member had put down in their day how much time everything took, even to going to the post office and back, and trying to justify being on staff, and just, I know it's hard, but I think she has to go because it's just not a healthy mentality. I love what Chris Hodges said. If people ask me when I work, and I have to tell them I don't know, because I don't know when I'm not working. Right. Because church life and ministry, and I'm not trying to burn people out. I take a weekly Sabbath. I take a preaching sabbatical every year where I take 4 weekends out of the pulpit. You have to stay healthy. But at the time, I've never seen a quality church leader who was driven by time. It's always driven by results. Right. Like, what are we accomplishing? What are we doing? So good. How do we move this ball forward? So good. And shepherds don't count hours, they count sheep. And then here's the thing, I would say the difference between somebody who's a hired hand and a shepherd. A hired hand is externally driven. A shepherd is internally driven. I tell our team all the time, ministry is an internally driven place. We're not a manufacturing company. You know what I mean? We don't have to pump out 100 windows this week to hit our benchmark. Ministry is a spiritual thing. And if you are in a place in your life where you have to constantly be externally driven, somebody's constantly having to motivate you from the outside. I've never seen that work well. And Jesus said that in that passage. He said the hired hand's just in it for the money. Money is a motivator, but it's a poor motivator, right? Because it's an external motivational deal.
Right.
And what happens is people end up feeling like they're not paid enough, or they're underpaid, or they're bitter about not being paid at all. And that, to me, that's just a poor mentality. Because as a leader, I've been unpaid, I've been poorly paid. You run the gamut in church life coming up. None of that stuff matters at the end of the day. We lay down our life for the flock to build a healthy church and a healthy ministry. And I just think there's some poor things. Money is a poor motivator. Positional status is a poor motivator. Control is a poor motivator. Just being in a place where somebody has to drive you, those things just don't work well in church life. Like, there has to be the internal motivation of, I was called to do this, I was created to do this, that I don't do this for a church, I don't do this for a pastor, I don't do this just for people, that I do this for the Lord Jesus Christ. That's the motivation of me, that Jesus saved me, Jesus called me to this, and that there's something on the inside of me that wakes up every day and says, I'm going to go build a team, to build a ministry, that this is who I am, this is what I do. And that internal motivation, to me, is one of the biggest keys to a shepherd's heart. That no one drives the shepherd to go tend the flocks. I mean, it's just completely internally driven. And man, when there's no internal drive, it just really kills the life of a ministry, a team, or a church, when there's a shepherd without that internal motivation.
And in the first century, so this illusion that Jesus keeps referring to with the sheep, the idea is like a hired hand are normally day laborers, meaning that they're just kind of passing from one place to the next and just need to work for a day. And so, hey, let me help you with your sheep. And so because that's not their sheep,
right,
the motivation will never be enough to actually take care of them. And like, if you don't have that mentality, like a shepherd knows his sheep. You said, my sheep, I know my sheep know me, voice. They know my voice. If you actually go to a sheep market in the Middle East today, have different flocks of sheep, but they'll all just follow their masters, that they are trained to know the shepherd.
I wish you knew something about the Bible.
They are trained to know the shepherd. Actually, that came from Dr. Phil Brassfield. But they follow the shepherd. And so whenever they're your sheep, you're invested with them, especially if you've raised them up from little lambs.
Right.
You know, it's such a different mentality than if you're in because it's a paid position, or you're in because hopefully if I serve long enough with you, someone else will recognize me and put me on a paid staff somewhere, or if people recognize my talent, so after I leave worship, they're going to applaud really loud and tell me how great of a job I did.
A job is a terrible way to look at ministry. Right. I mean, it really is. It's just a terrible way to look at ministry, because at the end of the day, it has to be, I was made for this. This is what I was created for. Right. And, you see it in the Bible. I mean, Paul made tents. He did without, but there was an internal drive that I'm going to go throughout the world preaching the gospel, establishing churches. And that's the heart of a shepherd, man. Right. I mean, that's just the heart of a shepherd.
And I think the Holy Spirit did this on purpose, because the shepherd imagery is used throughout Scripture. Right. It appears negatively often in the Old Testament. These are shepherds who are fleecing the flock. Right. And now Jesus, Ezekiel 34, I believe. And so then Jesus turns that on its head, and really he's alluding very heavily to Ezekiel 34 there, and showing the difference between the evil shepherds of Judaism. In context of John, these are the same Pharisees, evil shepherds that were upset that he healed on the Sabbath, that were willing to stone a woman caught in the act of adultery. They were the evil shepherds who did not care about their sheep. Right. They had other motivations. So that's the illusion there. But what I love about it is that a shepherd was not a prestigious job in the first. It was a very common job. A lot of people did it, but no one grew up saying, you know what I want to be?
I'm inspired.
Yeah, I'm gonna go around smelling like sheep all day. You know, like that,
Right.
that's my goal in life. But so in ministry, we have to. It's not always going to be glamorous. Like being a shepherd is messy. You do smell like the sheep.
Right.
It's dirty. It's not prestigious. And so a hired hand perhaps is thinking, you know, they see the benefits of ministry, where a shepherd realizes my job is dirty. Like this is something for Mike Rowe. Like Mike Rowe should be a pastor for a week.
Right.
You know, like, this dirty job, you know?
Dirty job.
Yeah, like,
Absolutely.
pastor. It is a dirty job at times, and it just takes a lot of commitment, and the prestige isn't always there.
No, and it comes down to, you know, Jesus said, I'll build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. And I think for young leaders, you have to settle and put your heart in a few things. One is you have to put your heart in where God has planted you.
Mm-hmm.
We live in a beach town, which you'd think that would be amazing, but it's a smaller community. It's not one of your major metro areas. And just honestly, as a pastor, man, when I hear people dissing our town, I check out on them. Like, I'm not going to pour into you if you don't love the community that we're in. Like, mm-hmm. I think as a shepherd, you have to love the community where God has placed you. I think the second thing is you have to love the church that God has placed you in. Mm-hmm. And surprisingly, there are people that they're hired hands, man. They do not lay down their life for the local church, which Ephesians 5, that's what Jesus did. He laid down his life for the local church. And I think at some point, you have to make that decision, that determination is, I'm going to love the community that I'm in. This is where God has planted me. I'm going to love the church that God has planted me in. And then the third thing is you have to get very comfortable, and you have to take ownership of the ministry that God has placed you in. And I think when your heart is pure in those things, that you will have an effective leadership, because I think people are drawn to that. I think that if there's any inauthenticity in any one of those three things, where you're in it, but you're not really in it, you're not really all in on the community you're in, or the church you're in, or the ministry you're in, I think it just puts a lid on you, because you just don't pass the smell test for people. But on the other hand, if you've got the right values and you do things with excellence, but you love where you're at, you love the church that you're a part of, and you love what God is doing in you and through you, I've never seen those leaders struggle to build healthy teams or to build healthy ministry. And that's honestly just one of the things that I feel like has been, if there's any secret sauce, it's just we love what we do. We love where we get to do it, and we love the people that we get to do it with, and we do it in a life-giving way. We do it in a way with excellence, and it's just amazing to see how that influences the lives of people, and more people want to be on the team doing what God's.
And sometimes we really get desperate for new strategies and systems, but if you don't love what you do, and you don't just have a heart for it,
right?
You can't out-strategize a heart that's not into it. You can't out-systematize a heart that's not into the ministry. You can try the best ideas that you have, the best ideas around the world, and if you are not genuinely in it with all of your heart, the best ideas will fail. And the opposite is also, like, I've seen really bad ideas work.
Yeah,
by people who have the right heart.
Absolutely.
Like things like, man, that's never. Oh wait, it worked. You know, because you can't do that. Oh wait, it's happened. Because if your heart's the right, and I'm sure with some of the early days of CoastLife, you did some things that you wouldn't do now, but your heart was in the right place. Bad ideas, but a good heart.
It was terrible. I can't believe in the early days anybody came to the church. I mean, I wouldn't have gone to the church, but I had to be there. I was the pastor, and but people came because we were where we loved. And I have the opposite of that story. Before we came and started CoastLife, Heidi and I were pastors of a church in Michigan. You know, Jesus said that he would build his church at the very gates of hell. Well, they had built this church on the wrong side of the gate. It was just somehow the plans got messed up, and they were on the other side of the gate. I mean, and my heart wasn't in it. It was an opportunity for me, but I didn't love the people. I didn't love the community. I didn't love it. And I was the same phenomenal preacher that I am today, same incredible leader that I am today, same brilliant mind that I am today. And it went nowhere. I mean, it went nowhere. Heidi and I did a spiritual inventory, and we both determined that we were way worse off spiritually being pastors of that church for the 2.5 years. And we just, man, we're not doing this anymore. On the other hand, we get to a place where we're authentic in who we are. We love the community. We love the church. We love the people. My heart is in it, and God blesses it, and people follow it because it's true. It's a shepherd's heart, in love with the community, in love with the church, in love with the ministry that God's placed you in. Not a hired hand, not just somebody helping out for an hour, but somebody who's dedicating their life to this.
You guys want to start throwing some questions our way? We'll fill those as they come up. Earlier, we just want to clarify real quickly. We mentioned relaunching CoastLife. We didn't exactly clarify what we mean by that, but a relaunch is simply a church that is dying or dead, in the process of becoming dead. And so rather than saying Jason took over a pastorate, there really wasn't much to take over. So it's almost like church planning in the sense that you go to where an existing church was, but you do something essentially brand new there.
Right. We did, it's called a replant, which is where you take the building, you close the old church. We had a Sunday where we closed out the old church, honored the people that were there, and just told them, this probably won't be your church anymore. You're welcome to come check out the new church, but this probably won't be your church anymore. If it's not, we still love you. I want you to find a place, a church home that'll be good for you. And then the next Sunday, we launched with the new name, everything new, new worship team that we'd connected with. And so we became CoastLife Church at that point and moved forward in that building, but everything about it is different.
Right. So that's you actually have a book coming out that tells that story. If they're interested.
Yeah, I do. I have a book coming out. I don't have a date for it yet, but it should be here in the next 3 to 4 weeks. It's called Reborn. It's the story of sort of relaunching CoastLife Church. Some of the values, many of them that I walked through with Dr. Brassfield. He was my friend and mentor, which he's always been that for many years, but especially during that season, helping me strategize how to close out the old church and relaunch the new church out of that building. And God blessed it in an amazing way. It's been a cool journey.
Right. And if any of you are interested in pastoring one day, maybe consider church planning at some point, I really encourage you to check out Jason's book and what he's doing, because what we're seeing and what Jason has lived is that there are a lot of established churches with property, with buildings, with assets, with something to start with. However, the congregations have dwindled down over the years, and that in the coming years, church revitalization will become incredibly important.
There's, I think, the number fluctuates obviously, but about 400,000 churches in America. Many of them, the average attendance is 70 to 80 people, which our country's growing exponentially, and churches aren't. And my deal on that is there's a lot of buildings out there that need to become churches again. They've got the steeple, they've got the cross, or whatever it is. But if we were honest, man, they haven't been churches in a long time. They haven't been converting, they haven't been baptizing, they haven't been raising up disciples. The life of the Holy Spirit isn't there. And I love church planners. I support church planners. We've sponsored and done all of that. And I believe in it strongly. And I believe it's one of the most effective ways to reach people is to plant a church. But I also firmly believe that there needs to be a large movement of young leaders that will get a hold of kingdom resources, because those buildings may be owned by a local church, but theologically they don't belong. They belong to Jesus. They belong to the kingdom. And there needs to be young leaders that will catch the vision for, there's a piece of property there that we could turn that back into a church. They still sing songs and people may still gather there, but the effectiveness of the church died years ago. And so not looking at a steeple or, some pews or whatever to identify a church. Let's look at baptisms. Let's look at people being born again and, born into the family of God.
Right.
And then If that's not happening, then let's look at a strategy to relaunch those things, because there's so many churches out there. I mean, if you started revitalizing churches, I believe with all my heart, the local church is the hope of the world.
Yes.
And if that's the case, man, then there's churches all over the landscape of America that need a fresh move of the Holy Spirit, which is why I called the book Reborn, because we were all dead in our sins. But yet, by the power of the Holy Spirit, we were raised to a new life and born again. And I believe that same process can happen in churches that are dead. That if the right leader gets in there with a vision, that the Holy Spirit can breathe on that thing. I've lived it. I mean, we went from 15 people to now about 450 people in 5 years, just because it's the breath of the Holy Spirit that breathed on that place, and it became a living church again. And there's not a lack of people looking for Jesus. I mean, there's people to reach. That's not the issue. It's just we need fresh vision. We need fresh strategy. We need fresh leaders to take churches and see them come to life again.
Perfect. Another question comes in, on how to engage. He says the men to volunteer, but maybe just in general, getting people involved. So as a shepherd, not a hired hand, but as a shepherd, you want to get people involved in your team. Are there some strategies for getting people involved?
I would say that you need to set a high level of expectation. People, for whatever reason, they set a very low level of expectation. And when you set a low level of expectation, you get a low level of commitment.
Right.
And when you set a high level of expectation, one of the best things we do now, just to join a team or whatever, I mean, we walk people through an orientation process. We walk people through what we're doing. We'll even ask for time commitments, like hey, we're going to need 12 months commitment out of this. And I think, if you want people to follow you, you have to want to be the best. Like, okay, if you're ushers, have to drive to be the best usher team in all of America. Ask for a high level of buy-in. I think you get what you ask for a lot of times. And I've seen people, will you just serve a half, leave during the middle of the service if you want to. We just please, Jesus, help us. Just, one half a Sunday a month. Nobody follows that. And it doesn't matter paid or unpaid. You set a high level of expectation, and high level leaders will meet that. And I think it really goes into not recruiting from need. Do not go to people from need. We need you. Go with vision. Go with purpose. Give the why behind the what. I mean, if you smell desperate, people will run from you. And I think sometimes people play just too victimized and too much need, and just have some confidence in what you're doing. Explain the why behind the what. That's so important. Why you're doing the things that you're doing. People
give both financially and with their time to vision rather than need. So you can get up every Sunday and say, y'all don't give, our church be like, gonna get paid this week.
Right. No.
But that doesn't work. But hey, look what we're doing, look what God's doing.
Yeah.
So the same thing goes with your time, is that if, we just have to have someone in the nursery next, and some of those kids are driving us crazy. But if you say, these children, they're gonna change our world one day.
They're absolutely.
And you have a chance to be there with them. So you just changes from the need to the vision.
Absolutely.
From the task to the purpose.
It's so important. I mean, everything that we do in church life is eternal. Everything. Keeping babies. I mean, loving on those kids and praying over those babies. And we even in nursery, we have some little thing that we do just to pray over them. And there's ministry that happens in every environment. Right. And just understanding the why you're there and explaining that to people, attaching it to the mission of the church. We talk about a parking lot to parking lot experience. When people pull on the parking lot, what do we want them to see and experience? Because, and the thing I tell people is, like, I always ask, who are you praying for to come to Christ? Who's that family member okay, now when that person comes to church, what do you want the weekend experience to look like? Awesome. Because every Sunday, somebody's family member is trying church again for the first time, and that person's praying like everything that things are going to go extremely well. And because the sermon begins in the parking lot. If our parking team ticks somebody off, it doesn't really matter what I say in the message that day.
Yeah.
If somebody's scared to drop their kids off in the children's environment because it's chaotic and crazy and whatever, there's nothing I can say to reach those people.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, if you're a ministry leader, knowing what you do and how effective it is, that we're all a part of that one, maybe 5 minute in the service where we're asking people to give their lives to Jesus. And so knowing how many people have come to Christ and saying, man, we're playing a part in that, you've got to attach it to the eternal things. And that's what I would do, recruiting men, women, children. I would attach it to the eternal. I would attach it to what matters the most. I would attach it to a big vision and a high level of expectation.
Right. So Jeremy asked, he recently started leading a volunteer team, and the leaders seem burnout, at times. Do you have any advice you give to reinvigorate a group? I think it's probably pretty similar, that if you're reminding them of the vision rather than the need, that eliminates some of the burnout.
I would, I would try to set up a system where people can have a weekend off. I mean, I think sometimes we do burn people out because we're expecting 52 weekends out of the year, right, or whatever. So, I mean, I would look at that. We try to do an ABC rotation in our teams. Mm-hmm. Not all of our teams are that well staffed, but that's our goal, is to get to an A team and a B team and a C team. And that's not in level of quality. That's right. In a calendar.
Yeah. You're going to be demoted.
Yeah.
That was a disaster in the parking lot. You're on the C team.
You're a C level leader. We've released a new classification of H for you. I would get that team in a non-ministry environment. I'd do some bowling and act like fools, which, if you're bowling, that's pretty much synonymous. But I just made all the bowlers mad. But I would get them in some community-driven thing. If it's just all task, the church is a community, and it's the power of a cup of coffee. I would go and personally spend time with those people in Starbucks or somewhere, and I would pour into their lives. I would create some type of party environment with some food and some hangout time. And then you're right, absolutely, I would refresh the vision of what's going on, because when it's just show up on Sunday and serve, it's going to be burnout. Everybody needs a weekend off every once in a while. Everybody needs a non-ministry environment where you restore yourself relationally with the team, that it's not just showing up and start opening doors or showing up and start handing out brochures, that there's community that's happening within the ministry. I mean, I'd find out what they're going through, man, and I'd be praying, and I'd make sure they get a text from me or one of the other leaders on the team. Hey, we are standing in agreement with you. That's a shepherd's heart. That's quality leadership right there.
Yeah. So we're running out of time, so we're going to take some of these a little more quickly.
Okay.
But you got
Is that your polite way of saying I talk too much?
No, not at all. I just said that they're going to log off at 7:30, whether we're done or not. So.
Okay.
No,
I'll just be here talking to Landon.
Because they're hired hands. So
they're tracking the hours.
You're tracking the hours.
Come on,
you were talking about the importance of loving. Okay. The question we're going to answer now is, your book, will it be on Amazon?
Yes, you can get it on, you'll be able to get it on Kindle. It's going to only be ebook, but you'll be able to get it on Kindle or iBooks.
Okay, so that'll come. And we'll do our best to send out if you'll let me know when it's available, and then we'll do our best to help you guys out. But we'll put it in the DLI bookstore as well. So loving your community, I mean, you obviously, I know the answer to this, but you can speak to it. Have a great relationship with the other churches in your area as part of loving your community.
I do. If I could be brutally honest, I don't have relationships with all of them, because not all of them have a passion to reach our community, satisfied in their tradition. And I don't roll with that, man.
Right.
I roll with the churches that want to actually do something. And so there's a group of pastors that we pray together, we conspire together, we exchange resources and ideas. We get together once a month to pray and just exchange resources. And so, no, I don't make an effort to go get along with every church, because honestly, the reality of what we do is too important to be locked in religious mindset. And my goal is not to get all the Christians together.
Right.
A lot of the stuff that I see is just to get all the Christians together. My goal is to reach the lost. I want to be empowered and equipped to reach the lost.
Yes.
And so we don't do a bunch of events just to get Christians in a room. We try to find people that we can be in relationship. We got some great relationships with churches that we exchange resources with, because we're all driven to reach the unchurched and the de-churched.
Right.
And so that, yeah, we run in that community.
I think one thing that's really great is that you have a great relationship with the church that's about 45 minutes from you,
Yes.
and they've been a huge help to you. Instead of seeing you as a competitor, they've really
right. They took us in, man,
yeah.
and you know, it made such an impact on me that we're not really much of a church that people look to a lot, but every once in a while, you know, you're always behind somebody and ahead of somebody else, and so every once in a while somebody will ask for something we've got, and man, I'll do everything that I can to help somebody, because that was what was done for me. I wouldn't be where I am today without Destiny and without the churches around us that sort of opened their doors to us and helped us. And so, you know, freely you receive, freely give.
That's right. And there was one more question about your launch I saw come through, or your relaunch, about the number of people you lost from the original congregation.
Okay.
All of them?
There wasn't many to lose, but there was 15. We lost 14, and there's one lady who is in her 90s that cries every morning at the 9 a.m. service and says she prayed for 20 years for this. Awesome. And it breaks me down, man, because she literally will come and hug me after the 9 a.m. service, and it's just, she's overwhelmed by it, and what vision,
right,
and what persistence. And we're all there because she prayed for 20 years for us to be there. So
and CoastLife is not a church designed for 90-year-olds.
No.
So for her to see the bigger picture,
screaming guitars and LED lights, and
to, you know, it's just amazing.
She told me Sunday, she's like, I just tell people, if you hang around, you'll learn to love it.
Yes.
And so we lost everybody except for one person. Anytime you make a major transition, you're going to lose 15 to 20% at least of your congregation. But the payoffs of that are much higher. You'll see the negative within 90 days. You won't see the benefit till 9 months. And so when you make a decision, you have to stand with it, because you're going to see the negative consequences first, and then you'll see the payoff later.
Very good. All right. So if there's nothing else, lots of comments. There's nothing else. We're going to go ahead and log off. Thank you guys for tuning in tonight.
Thank you guys. Thank you, Landon. I appreciate it.
Jason, that was amazing. Thank you. Got so much positive feedback already. So you guys stay tuned. Our next webinar is with Pastor Ryan Lowe from West Monroe, Louisiana. Christ Church West Monroe is another church doing amazing things, and Ryan's brilliant, and I can't wait to have him here with us next time. So you guys have if you have any questions, just let us know, and be blessed.